My name is Christy Hutton. Last night we had the privilege of recording a next episode with Gideon Scheltema in our podcast Lex Events about the notorious bank robber André Stander. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, Netflix in 2003, I think, brought out a movie based on this notorious bank robber who's really made the headlines. It's worth watching if you haven't seen it yet. But here's the real life story from the perspective of the prosecutor who actually prosecuted him and procured his conviction and sentence. Good evening, Gideon,
Good evening, Christy.
and welcome back here with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks once again for allowing me the privilege to be on your show.
It's a pleasure. Gideon, I'm so excited. I believe tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the infamous Captain Stander, who was the most famous bank robber South Africa had ever had, and who captured the imagination of all the people back in those days. And that was the first big case you really did when you were state prosecutor back in the 80s.
Yes, in the 70s.
In the 70s.
After I was admitted as an advocate and after I started working as a state advocate, this case landed on my desk and I was not fully prepared for it because I was still very new in the game.
Yeah, and you went to trial quite quickly after his arrest, didn't you?
Yes, André Stander was arrested, as far as my memory serves me, during January 1980.
Yeah. And you went to trial when?
Soon after that, and I think we concluded the trial by May that year.
Yeah, that is quick, eh? It's not like today.
No, definitely not.
You don't tell us a bit about your experience with the André Stander case. It must have been very, very interesting.
Yes, I was the leader of my team. I was assisted by Advocate Anton Ackerman.
And so, what did you tell us about the modus operandi of the Robin Hood robber?
That's absolutely correct. You mentioned earlier that he was famous. Some people would say he was notorious. There were different views about André Stander, but generally, as the evidence unfolded, witnesses referred to him as the friendly robber. Some of the newspapers labeled him the Robin Hood of South Africa because of the very daring manner in which he robbed banks. He robbed more than 40 banks. Now, I can't remember in the criminal law history of any other case where a robber robbed 40 banks in South Africa and got away with it.
And how did he get away with it? What did he do?
Christy, he stuck to a very simple plan. He didn't talk about the robberies whom he committed. And then secondly, he created a watertight alibi. He was based in Kempton Park at the time as the branch commander of the detectives at that station, and he made quite certain that his alibi could be proved. In other words, various detectives at that station met with André every morning at around about 7:30 to be briefed with regards their tasks for the day in the Johannesburg area, Soweto, and those sort of areas. There was always an arrangement that later in the day, normally at about 1:30, 2 o'clock, André would meet up with the same detectives again at the Kempton Park police station. In other words, he was seen there early morning and he was seen there later during the day. In the meantime, these robberies were committed in Durban during the morning.
Oh, I see. So he met with them in the morning, flew down to Durban, commit the robbery,
Correct.
Fly back, and then in time for the briefing in the afternoon.
Correct. And he knew the system so well. He was a very good policeman. So he knew the system in his own station. He also knew the system in Durban because he worked in Durban for quite a long time as a narcotics policeman. He knew most of the detectives in the murder and robbery unit in Durban. So he knew how they would investigate these robberies in Durban, because the Durban detectives steadfastly believed that the robber was actually from Durban And after he had robbed banks, he probably went to some hotel. The way these robberies were executed led those detectives on a wild goose chase.
Okay. And now did he make use of disguises and stuff like that? And did he operate alone, or did he operate in a gang, or how did he go about?
Part of his success, he was a so-called lone wolf. He operated on his own, did not tell anybody what he was doing, despite the fact that his lifestyle changed quite dramatically during the period of these robberies. But he did everything on his own, and his disguise was in the form of false registration plates for cars, wigs, moustaches, and other forms of disguise.
Okay.
And he was a master at that.
How did he get to the points, the banks where he robbed them?
Christy, in a nutshell, his modus operandi was to fly from Johannesburg to Durban every day, carrying with him a bag containing the disguise that he wanted to use in Durban, like the moustaches and the wigs, and also the important for him was false registration plates, because he would arrive in Durban, rent a car, and the moment he left the car rental agency,
he'd swap the number plates.
He would swap the number plates, and he knew that the false registration plates would put the police on a further wild goose chase, because in many instances, bank tellers noticed the registration of the vehicle, the getaway vehicle, which he drove on his own, by the way. He didn't have assistance, so he drove his own getaway vehicle, but he made quite certain that the bank tellers would have sufficient time to take note of these registration plates, and then believing, of course, that they had enough evidence to find the robber.
I see. In the meantime, it's just a trick to set them on the wrong path.
Simply a trick. Yes, no, that's correct.
And Gideon, now tell me, after he was arrested, before you started the trial, was there a bail application, or did he not apply for bail, or what was the position?
Yes, at the time of André's arrest, and when I got involved as the prosecutor in this matter, we got notification that André was going to apply for bail, and that caused great concern, because up to his arrest and having robbed 40 banks, he successfully evaded arrest and the police's attention for more than 3 years.
Oh, that's a long time. Eh?
That's a long time, and we were concerned that André would make a plan to escape the moment he is admitted to bail.
I mean, he's by his very nature flight risk.
And our investigations also showed that André was a very good driver, and once he gets behind the steering wheel of a car, he could easily set off in any direction, into Africa, into Namibia, basically anywhere. And that was our concern.
But when you say you decided to investigate this, what was the method of your investigation? What did you guys do?
Christy, we linked with the highest police authority at the time, one Lieutenant Colonel Barcy Smith. He was the head of all the detectives in South Africa, a very senior policeman, a very competent policeman. We discussed the matter with Colonel Smith, because André was at that stage in a prison in Durban, and we discussed this and decided we've got to find a method to find out how André is thinking. What is he thinking about this bail application? What were his plans? And then decided to intercept letters written by André to his wife, Leonie, whom he fondly called Becky.
Okay.
And those letters were important for us in opposing the bail application, because in one of those letters, a detailed escape plan was set out in André's own handwriting.
No, you lie. Really?
In the finest detail. He planned his escape with precision. Everything had to go according to plan.
And so he was writing this to her in his own handwriting?
He wrote this to her because he needed her assistance. In short, the plan entailed the following. André was going to ask Colonel Smith to be given the opportunity to go to his home for a short duration to fetch some clothing for his upcoming trial. He wanted to be dressed in a smart way. He needed a suitcase and he needed some clothing. And he knew Colonel Smith would probably allow him that opportunity because Colonel Smith was very fair in his investigation. And André knew that. He knew Colonel Smith. He wrote to his wife to keep his own car on standby. He insisted that she also be present when Colonel Smith would bring André home to fetch the clothing, because in André's way of thinking, he indicated to her in the letter that some of the police present at his home would also focus their attention on Becky, who was a very attractive woman.
Oh, I see.
That was the way of thinking.
So he used it as bait to
Yes.
get the
Yes.
focus on her.
And he asked Becky to attempt to distract the police's attention so that he would find a moment where he could run out of the house and get into his, I think it was a Ford Cortina. He requested Becky to leave the key in the ignition so that he could merely jump in the car and drive off. And he made it quite clear that once he was behind the steering wheel of that car, they will never see him again. He asked his wife to make certain that there was enough fuel in the car and also extra containers of petrol, food, a medical kit, a survival kit, and matters like that.
So yeah, planned out.
It was an elaborate plan.
Okay.
And André was confident that once he would manage to get into the car,
he was going to be gone.
Colonel Smith and his team would never see him again.
Yeah.
He had a good knowledge of the neighboring states. I think through his work in narcotics, experience in that sort of thing.
Okay. So now how did this come out in the bail application?
A lot came out in the letter that he wrote about the detailed plan. But of course, we investigated his work as a policeman. We knew that he could drive cars very fast. We knew he knew the neighboring states. We knew quite a lot about his experience because he was a very good policeman and an experienced one. Okay. So we had to factor that into the bail application. Considering the letter that he'd written, we knew it was important to stop André at that stage. And for that reason, the letter was intercepted. We kept a copy and we made certain that the original letter reached his wife. So André didn't know that
it was intercepted.
Yeah.
He didn't know about it.
He didn't know that we knew about his plan. But he nevertheless proceeded with the bail application. He was defended by a very, very senior advocate, a competent advocate. I think it was Advocate Moorman Mens. He practiced, I think, in Standerton.
Okay.
But he was a well-respected advocate and a very senior advocate on top of it.
All right. But now how did the letter feature in the bail application?
Yes. André gave evidence and his evidence was very well presented. In other words, he gave very good evidence. On the face of it, it was persuasive. The judge seemed to have believed André at some point because he was convincing. Under cross-examination, we produced the letter. We folded the letter double.
So you ambushed him with this letter?
We ambushed him.
So he didn't know about it?
He didn't know.
Okay.
We showed him half of the first page. The first half did not deal with the plan of escape, but at least André admitted it was his handwriting. There was some personal detail about his address. So once he admitted it was actually his handwriting, it was then quite simple to go to the next step. And we asked him to look at the rest of the letter. He was constrained to admit that he wrote the letter, much to the shock and surprise of his counsel, the advocate.
But did you make him read out the letter in court?
Yeah, once André realized that the game was up, I still remember that he dropped his voice. He was almost whispering because he knew he was in trouble.
Yeah, like a proper
We had now caught him with his pants down.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And we asked him to read the letter out as loud as he could. And that was in the court pack room. It's a lot of media attention,
yes,
friends and family. His own parents were there. So this must have been quite embarrassing for André, a top policeman, to read out a letter which set out in the finest detail an elaborate escape plan. At that moment, his counsel asked for an adjournment, asked for the matter to stand down. He promptly withdrew as his advocate on record shortly after that.
Oh, of course, because he didn't know about this,
Yes.
this plan that his client had.
I've got no doubt that his advocate was also caught by surprise and he did not know of André's escape plan because from an ethical perspective, I don't think Advocate Mens would have proceeded with the bail application well knowing
Well,
an escape plan in the making here.
I suppose it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that he didn't get bail at the end of the day.
No, he in fact abandoned his bail application.
Oh, is that?
He did not proceed with the bail application.
So
Now, that was the real first mistake that André made in bringing the bail application, because now we all knew there's dishonesty in the picture, that we've got to be very careful with his evidence, because all of this could affect other aspects of the trial as well. Even at that stage, we had not proved anything yet insofar as his guilt was concerned, but the scene was set that we would succeed because of the manner in which André brought the bail applications. It was important.
Okay. Look, if we just go over to the actual trial and the evidence, who were your witnesses, and what evidence did you rely on eventually to work towards the conviction that you obtained?
Christy, yes, we called quite a number of bank tellers. The bank tellers is basically just told us how they were robbed. In other words, the amount of money taken, what did the robber say to them, and matters like that. But in general, all these bank tellers told the court the robber was very softly spoken, very well dressed, very well groomed, treated them actually very well. In general, the tellers referred to him as the gentleman robber, or rather the press, based on the evidence of all these bank tellers.
Okay, so he didn't rob the banks like in the movies,
No,
where you see where people come in with machine guns and shoot up the place. And
in most cases, he approached the teller with a smile on his face. He greeted the tellers, good morning, good afternoon, and placed the gun on the counter and almost whispered, I want all the money that you've got. And that almost presented a problem for us during the trial, because some of the witnesses who testified said they handed the money to this robber because he spoke so nicely to them.
And almost like they gave it away.
The judge just frowned upon this because we had to prove robbery. In other words, we had to prove that these tellers handed the money to the robber because they were in fear of the robber.
Yes, and they were forced to do so.
I remember one case, one of the young girls said, no, she just handed the money to this robber because he was very handsome and very polite, much to the surprise of the judge. He was not happy with that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So that's why he became known as the gentleman robber.
Okay.
But his downfall was also because in one instance, a bank teller, I do remember her surname, De Marini, she testified that she saw the getaway car. This was shortly after the robber had left the bank, and she scribbled on a piece of paper the last 4 digits of the registration plate.
Okay.
Which she kept for a while, but not for too long. If my memory serves me correctly, this girl didn't have a matric, and she did not claim to have an exceptional good memory, and now she was testifying 2 years later. Stander's advocate at that stage, his new advocate was Advocate Johan Els, a very competent and seasoned advocate, senior advocate from Pretoria.
And of course, yes, he's going to play the game that you can't, your memory is unreliable, and like we all do that under cross-examination.
Absolutely. He tried to capitalize on this girl's inexperience, vulnerabilities as a young girl, and particularly because she had not kept the piece of paper, so she had no written record of the number that she saw. And what was André's downfall in that count, and that was really the beginning of his downfall on the other counts as well, because she said she had a weakness. She had a bad habit. She told Judge Page she's got the bad habit because she likes gambling. She was very fond of gambling. And from the very next day after the robbery, she started using those 4 digits that she saw on as the last part of the registration plate as a jackpot number. And she kept on trying. She was unsuccessful in the beginning, but she knew, she said, she always knew with those numbers, those will be her luckiness. She will get the jackpot with those numbers. And eventually, she had no need to keep the piece of paper on which she had written the number.
Because she could recall it so well.
She had memorized that number forever.
Etched into her brain.
And then she added. A couple of months later, she actually got the jackpot on those 4 numbers.
No, really?
Judge Page just smiled. The advocate was lost for words.
I can imagine.
And He sat down.
Yeah.
He had no further questions to this girl.
Yeah, no, that was.
And shortly after that, they actually changed their plea to one of guilty on some of the counts.
Okay.
Because they did not know what other evidence we've got. Because Mr. Marini gave evidence which actually put André away.
And what other evidence did you have?
We had quite a lot of evidence from other tellers, but one significant witness, which is equally important for our case, was the evidence of Cornelius van Deventer, also known as Corrie. And Corrie was a colleague of André. They worked together as policemen. Corrie later on joined the security police, but they also went into business together. But Corrie was a long-standing friend of André. And he visited André one night in one of the beachfront hotels. I think it was the Maharani Hotel. And in André's room, he saw a suitcase full of money. There was a lot of money. The suitcase was open, and Corrie was flabbergasted.
I can imagine.
Where did all this money come from?
Yeah.
And then André confessed that he'd actually robbed the bank in Umhlanga Rocks that day. During that same night, he told Corrie that he was deeply involved in the robbing of banks, because this was his best friend for many years, and told Corrie that he had already robbed more than 40 banks. And he proposed to Corrie to also get involved with him and to get the job as the driver of the getaway car in future, but Corrie was not interested.
I can imagine. Yeah. So did this cause a rift between them? Or?
It did, because later on, the police, I'm talking about the top structure of the police in South Africa, offered a reward to anyone who could bring information which would secure a conviction of this robber who was robbing the banks in Durban and also in Johannesburg. Corrie then spilled the beans. He actually traveled to Pretoria and he spoke to the generals there. He wanted his reward.
Oh, I see. So he actually then told on his friend.
And once he told the top structure of André's elaborate plan and how he robbed the banks, then a trap was set for him. And Lieutenant Colonel Basie Smith, he headed that investigation. Eventually, Colonel Smith knew that André would, upon return from Durban after robbing banks, would have certain items in his possession. And on one occasion, when André returned to Johannesburg on a flight, Colonel Basie Smith was waiting for him in the arrival of the Jan Smuts Airport. And he put it to André, because he knew André. He said, André, in that bag, you've got so much money, you've got a beard, you've got a moustache, and you've got a registration plate with the following numbers. André didn't say a word, but the game was up.
Okay. And he was discovered like that?
He was discovered like that. Okay. And then they discovered more evidence at his home in the form of cash, a lot of cash stashed away. There was even a room full of biltong. And the evidence was that the value of the biltong in those years, I'm talking about 1980, was 3,000 Rand.
Yes, that's a lot of biltong.
So, I don't know, that's quite a lot of biltong.
You know, you eventually secured your conviction. What was the sentence?
Christy, the sentence was 17.5 years imprisonment. Of course, it was much more, but the sentence was taken together. The various counts of robbery were taken together for the purpose of sentence, but effectively, André was given 17.5 years.
Okay, because I think I read in the newspaper clippings there was a total of 70 years. That was, but the sentence ran concurrently. It would be 17 in total that he would be sitting.
You're absolutely correct. In fact, I remember the day that André was sentenced very well. That is something that always stuck out for me, because André was very nattily dressed on that day. He wore a pinstripe suit. The day that he was sentenced, he called me closer. He congratulated me. The wind was taken slightly out of my sails, because André went on. He wished me well with my career and things like that. He was very complimentary of the way the prosecution was conducted. And that puzzled me for a while, because I could not understand how a man who had just been sentenced to 17.5 years would be so grateful for the manner in which the prosecution was done. Little did I know that André had other plans. He knew that he was not going to serve the full 17.5 years. Okay. That was just André Stander. He had already made plans that he would escape from a very high security prison in South Africa.
Okay.
As he had made the plans, to escape during the bail application. He had made plans to escape after his sentence. He knew that he was going to be on the run.
Okay. And did he? Did he manage to
Yes,
escape?
he befriended two people in this prison, one Hale and one McCall, struck up a friendship, and he explained to these two gentlemen how easy it is to rob banks. And he promised them that if they could escape successfully, that he will train them further, give them practical training as to how to rob banks. They were all very excited.
You'll give them trade craft lessons, a masterclass on robbing banks.
I can't remember the detail today of the escape, but he did escape from a high security facility in Pretoria, and immediately upon this escape, André gave them their first lesson when they robbed 3 banks which were situated right next to each other in Jorrison Street,
Can't
Braamfontein.
believe this.
And
that is so bold. Hey?
André told them, just never panic. Don't run away. Just be calm. Walk out of a bank. Every time, do not panic. And in that instance, when they robbed the first bank, actually walked to the second bank.
No.
Which was right next door. As they entered the second bank, the police entered the first bank, and there was chaos there. André moved on to the third bank, and as the police got to the second bank, André was already in the third bank.
Good grief. So they were fugitives.
No, they...
and going about it quite calmly.
As if this was one great adventure. I think they enjoyed this adventure because André was very adventurous.
Now, did they get away with those 3 bank robberies then?
No, they got away with that. And they took the money they took in those bank robberies, the 3 banks, and set off to the Transkei because André indicated to his 2 friends they need to lie low because the whole of the country at that stage was looking for them, because now the police had proper police photographs because of that they were escaped from a jail. The whole of South Africa was looking for André Stander. Every single police station, there were police out to look for him in every province. So they made their way to the Transkei because André needed a break from prison life. He had now just escaped. He wanted to get to the Transkei to go and fish. And he really loved fishing. He loved outdoor life, and he took McCall and Hale with him to the Transkei. They were fishing, and on one day, André looked over his shoulder, and there were 4 white Land Rovers on the dune. It appeared all of a sudden. And André knew that the Transkei police in those days drove white Land Rovers.
And then?
A number of policemen walked down the dune, approached André, and at that moment, McCall and Hale wanted to jump up and run away. And André reprimanded them and told them, stay where you are. Just carry on. Do the normal things. Read. And then these 2 police, not 2, in fact, 2 policemen spoke to him, but there were others in their company as well. They showed André photographs of himself, of Hale and McCall, and asked André how long they've been at that part of the coast fishing. André said they were there for about a week, and the policeman asked him whether he's ever seen these gentlemen depicted on the photographs. André was looking at a photograph of himself, and he assured the policeman he's never seen this gentleman that's depicted on the photograph. Then the Hale and McCall were also called closer by André, and photographs of the 3 of them were then shown to these friends. And they did exactly the same. They shook their heads. They've never seen these people. And André has put the mind at rest of these policemen, would question him by indicating to them that they will assist as far as they could. If they see these people anywhere on that coastline, they would immediately contact the police and ask for the contact details of the police so they could assist the police in apprehending these fugitives of justice. So they got away with that as well.
Good grief.
And then André decided things are getting hot now. They better split up. They can't stay together. And he indicated to the other 2, they must split up. Each robber must go his own way.
Okay. I heard read that he eventually ended up in Fort Lauderdale.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Christy, I haven't got first-hand knowledge on that, but from my research at the time, and the facts that came to my knowledge afterwards, was that André actually made his escape via a private yacht from Cape Town to Miami.
Good grief.
To get to Fort Lauderdale. Because it would have been too dangerous for André and his comrades to actually leave the country via an international flight. Because at that stage, the airports were on high alert, Durban, Cape Town, but in particular, the old Kempton Park, Jan Smuts Airport, was on high alert. They expected André to show up to leave the country.
Okay.
There were scores of policemen on duty for several days waiting for André, but he never pitched. He was already in a yacht on his way to Miami.
Good grief. And so he sailed across the world.
He made his escape across the Atlantic and safely arrived in Miami, settled in Fort Lauderdale, and carried on with a fairly lavish lifestyle. André had an eye for the girls, young girls, bit of social life. He acquired a vehicle there, I understand. And perhaps he actually pushed things too far. He pushed his luck too far.
Yes.
Because he started living life again, which entailed risk. One night he went through a traffic light or a stop street. A young constable gave chase, and that's exactly what André thrived on, being chased, a high-speed car chase.
Yes.
And the young policeman who chased after him didn't know he was actually chasing the most notorious bank robber that the world has ever seen. Nobody else in the world has robbed 40 banks, and they got away with it.
Yeah.
André didn't know anything about this policeman who tried to stop him. And I do believe that André was shot in that car chase. I'm not certain with what type of firearm, but he was killed. Okay. And André's life ended in that fashion.
Quite sadly.
According to reliable information. I'm now also dealing with what I read in the press at the time and other information.
And that's such a sad story, because his father was a general or a major or something in the police.
It's indeed a sad story, because André excelled at school, especially in sporting activities. He didn't like studying. He didn't like to be confined behind a desk, for example. He loved the outdoor life. He was very good at sport. He loved animals. In particular, he ate dogs, horses, and he came from a very, very upstanding, good family.
Solid background, yeah.
Very solid. His father was a general, retired general in the police. The family had very high expectations for André.
Gideon, in closing, if we need to wrap this up, like they say, come in for a landing, what would you say?
I hope not a crash landing.
What would you say? What made somebody coming from a background like that fall to such depths where where you end up dead in the streets in the USA, running away from the law, the very law that you were so used to growing up with it? Your father is a general in the police and so on. How does that happen? How does the apple fall so far from the tree?
Christy, that's a very, very good question. And over the years, I've actually grappled with that same question. I've personally, that's just my personal view, André thrived on risk and adventure. That was his personality. His personality type is very important. And he was not the type of policeman that would have conformed with the rules of society. He loved fast cars and he loved risk. He took exceptional risk in these robberies. And if one analyzed how he did it, he always went back for more. Robbing 40 banks in a short space of time indicates that he thrived on that type of excitement and risk. And I personally think that André was that type of person.
He was just addicted to...
He was addicted to risk.
And the adrenaline.
And obviously he had a certain personality type that would fit the picture here.
Okay. Gideon, what about a cup of coffee?
I think I need it.
Thanks, Gideon.
Thank you, Christy.